Superannuation is every Australian's most important investment. The decisions you make now can have a large impact on when you can afford to retire and the lifestyle you'll enjoy when you do. There are so many companies to pick from for your super, but did you know that you can also manage it yourself? Edge Financial Services can help you take control of your super and plan for retirement with a self-managed super fund. There are many different ways for you to invest in your future. To find out more about investment strategies that will give you the edge in retirement, visit edge.net.au today.
Hi everyone, Scott from Edge Specialist Advice Network. I hope you're all well. Hey, today, another installment of What the Numbers Say, and as usual, we're using Visual Capitalist for our reports. Now, what I want to look at today is the trend and also the change of semiconductor production via country. Now, why does semiconductor production matter? It matters because your semiconductors and your chips, computer chips, are in absolutely everything. Most importantly, they're in two things that either competing factions of the world are trying to have the monopoly on and also control, and space tech and military and surveillance. Because this is the era we're moving into, right? So zero freedom, 100% surveillance. Countries are trying to have the domination of that, but also space tech, and space tech equals military tech, actually. And it also goes with surveillance tech, so it's all the same thing, right? So when you have a look at this, it goes from 1990 through to the future estimation of 2032. 2032 has been one of those years that we've had pushed. We've said is a very special year. It potentially could be around that time. Collapse of the existing system or morphing, rebirth of a new monetary system. It's kind of mathematically, that's kind of how things are looking. Maybe that will change. Maybe the US will get their debt under control with the Doge team, but I have some doubts. And okay, let's have a look at this graph then. All right, so what we're looking at, semiconductor production. This is what we talked about. So everything military, everything surveillance. Okay, by location, 1990 to 2032. So the future. That's this little skinny bar here. Now let's have a look at this. So the US in 1990 was 37%, and Japan was actually 19%. So why am I including Japan in that? Why am I mentioning Japan? Because they're basically an ally of the US, subservient to the US. So Japan wasn't going to hide away production of semiconductor chips. They're actually going to give them to the US. So the US had almost full monopoly, and if you look at Europe there, and Europe being subservient to the US as well, if we look at NATO, then pretty much the US was the dominant. It just had everything. It just a full monopoly globally, really. Now, fast forward, so that decade into 2000s, and you see, look, you start to get a little bit of Korea, a little bit of Taiwan, and a little bit of China. Now, China and Taiwan, so you can say, oh, well, Taiwan is not China. It kind of is. And also Taiwan was friendly to the US. Yeah, kind of. Half their population is. The other half of the population wants to go back to being China. So that civil war still exists. And we then start fast forwarding, and we're looking at through. So that was the year 2000, where Taiwan and China burst onto the scene. Hey, guess what? We can do semiconductor production as well. We've never been able to do that. It's like bang, here comes Asia. South Korea as well. Okay, now South Korea, part of the Five Eyes, so we still lump them in with Japan, the US, and the EU as well, Europe, right? So even from 2000 to 2010, the Western world still had the majority. But look at this, 2010 to 2020, and now 2020 to 2025. So this is today, okay? So China has 15%, and you can look at Taiwan, 22%. So if we actually go via country, Taiwan is the largest, and Japan is very close second. So why does everyone focus on Taiwan? What is it about? It really is about it's really about the semiconductor chips, which is why there's been a shift to try and convince Taiwan to bring semiconductor production back into the US, but it takes like 10 years to sell a factory, right? So this is like the really hard bit. Now look at this projection here, 2025 to 2030 sees the estimated move from China to go to 15% of the world's semiconductor production to 24. So almost basically a quarter of the world's semiconductor production is going to be with China, which is not part of the West at all. And you can see the diminishing EU. The EU is a basket case. It's just it's a bankrupt, failed experiment, of socialism. But look at the US as well. Went all the way down from 37, domiciled in the US, all the way down to an estimated 11%. And you can understand why then. The US is going really, really hard on tariffs. You can understand why the US is flexing its might militarily, and you can understand why it pushes back on China about Taiwan, because Taiwan has had this massive increase in the production of semiconductor chips, and so has China. And so if you put these two together, let's just say we have 2025 to 2030, right? This is Taiwan in the purple, 18%, and then China 24%. So if China forcibly took Taiwan back and nationalized all of those semiconductor factories, or if Taiwan voted to finish the civil war that started about 90 years ago and reclaim to being back into China and having the governance system come across them, then that is a huge, it's like getting close to half of the world's semiconductor production will be in that Chinese sphere. And all of the military, space tech and surveillance tech would be pretty much dominated by these guys, which is why you've even had, out of the Biden camp, you even had people like, well, no, it wasn't even Biden. I think it was Lindsey Graham, Warhawk Lindsey Graham talked about, hey, that if China would come along and take Taiwan, then the US should actually just bomb Taiwan back to rubble as if it's Gaza, pretty much. Don't worry about the 25 million people living there. They would have to sacrifice their lives because you couldn't let China get hold of all of the semiconductor factories and take them over. That was what they said, right, out loud on TV. I think it was on CNN. So that is how much focus and that is how much pressure that it gets put onto these areas and these companies and this geopolitical construct. So this is what that is all about. Is there going to be a war with China? I don't know. However, the US is focusing very heavily on China. They're pulling right back. They're going to pull out of Europe. They're going to leave Russia alone. They're going to focus on China 100%. And this is part of the reason, because eventual computer AI dominance, military tech dominance, surveillance state dominance, they will not allow China. They will try to not allow China to have that. And so, if that means going to war and blowing Taiwan back into the ocean, then some parts of the US government believe that that's a price worth paying. Watch this space. Does it mean some semiconductor companies are going to have an amazing increase in price? Maybe. NVIDIA always felt overpriced to us from a lot of metrics, but people still keep buying it. And when you look at it, then maybe this is wise, because some of the semiconductor chip companies that the US can control is getting a lot of money pumped into them. Therefore, that's pushing up the share price as well. So anyway, guys, look, I thought it was interesting. There is going to be, I guess, if you want to take something from Star Wars called the Clone Wars, I guess you could call it the Semiconductor Wars, because that means that you can't have a drone war without semiconductors, and the semiconductors need to be made first. So you would first have the semiconductor war. I think that's what's happening. Anyway, let's keep our eyes open, make sure we're ahead of things, and make sure we know how to deploy our capital and protect it as well. All right, that's enough from me, guys. Remember, life is a family sport. Give yours an edge. See ya.
John's home-based tradie business has outgrown his garage. With work starting to pick up, John wants to take on an apprentice, upgrade the work ute, and move to an industrial shed. It was hard for John to get a loan because he has inconsistent income. John saw Toowoomba's Edge Lending, the business lending experts. Edge Lending was able to secure a loan to help grow his business by tapping into the equity in his home. Edge Lending Solutions, helping small businesses to grow.